Hello, this is Scott Bicheno, editor of telecoms.com, here at the Mavenir stand at Mobile World Congress 2025, where we're about to have a special discussion about the current state of play of Open RAN. And I'm delighted to be joined by three industry luminaries. I don't know what a lumini is. Joe from Mobile Experts, Rob from AT&T, and BG from Mavenir. So I'm going to get straight into it and ask you first, Joe. Open RAN has been a prominent theme, maybe you could call it a buzzword in the mobile industry for quite a few years now. And I think this is a great opportunity to take stock, compare where it is now to to the promises and the expectations originally around it. So can you just frame this whole discussion by taking us through the state of play of Open RAN right now?
Okay. Well, actually, Open RAN is multiple things, and the vision that came around 5 years ago was a vision of mix and matching different software and hardware through open front haul, but it was also an open software platform where you could have applications to run on your network and customize the network. And so there's multiple things involved here. The market took off, and there was pretty decent revenue. For the last couple of years, 2021 and 22 were pretty decent with greenfield deployments, so there were thousands and tens of thousands of base stations shipped into the field for greenfield operators who had no legacy equipment to deal with, and it was a low-cost, high-quality choice that they could put in easily, and so that went quite well. And I think one of the problems in the industry is that early success had people extrapolating to ongoing revenue growth that was just unrealistic, because those greenfield customers were limited. There's only a few, and that's kind of a lumpy business. It comes and it goes. That part is over now. That greenfield revenue has sort of crashed down from the early deployments, and it'll come back here and there with sporadic limited deployments. I think now we're into the more interesting market, which is the brownfield market. Yeah. Operators like AT&T that have legacy equipment, and they have to integrate new RAN features together with old legacy equipment, and that's a much more complex thing. And so I think where we are now is that we have some operators making choices to change the vision, the early vision of Open RAN, away from all this mix and match to maybe selecting one software vendor and having multiple hardware vendors, or there might be other visions as well. But I think AT&T has a really sensible approach to have a single RAN software platform and then have multiple hardware vendors supporting that, and then have the ability to add applications and things for automation and customization and AI and other things on the network. That vision of an ongoing Open RAN system, I think, is very realistic. And so in my forecast charts, I have relatively steady growth going from this year through 2030. And I think when we get to the 6G cycle, I think a lot of new spectrum coming out, a lot of networks are going to be deployed with Open RAN as the basis.
Right. Okay, so you've teed it up perfectly for Rob. Obviously, AT&T, one of the biggest operators in the world, and definitely a brownfield operator. Perhaps off the top of your head when AT&T was first created, but it must be like 100 years ago or something.
148 years ago.
140, oh, there we are.
148, yes.
Right, oh, so I was underestimating, so there we are. Maybe you are the oldest operator in the world. So, to pick up on what Joe was just saying, can you tell us the state of play, maybe also look at how things were when Open RAN first came along as a concept versus now, and just bring us up to speed on the state of play with AT&T and Open RAN?
So I think, first of all, I think Joe did a great job describing what we intend to do with Open RAN and how we're pivoting even the vision of it's not just about TCO, it's not about supplier diversity, not just about those things, but it really is finally about network programmability. So it is really about moving ourselves forward to truly being a software-driven network. That's the number one goal and objective that we have to achieve. We know software-driven things, software-driven networks for other parts, other functions of the network have been widely successful at rapidly bringing innovation and breaking this classic G cycle, the 10-year cycle that we often get stuck in. By making the network more programmable, by integrating SMO, you can absorb AI. You can absorb new cloud concepts. And finally, you can absorb new spectrum, most of which today comes with strings. So we see applications being useful even in spectrum management and in spectrum sharing. So this is really the opportunity that we move forward with, is it's not just finally about the hardware or how many logos can we hang on the wall. It really is finally about us having a network that's programmable, not just for us to support optimization or automation. These are very important pillars for us, and we're moving our existing base of applications for optimization over to the platform actively right now. We're rebuilding our automation tools, which are bespoke for the platform now. And now that we have that, we can take advantage of the fact that we have a stable platform that we can use. But finally, there's real opportunity to support differentiated connectivity, and this is the great opportunity for revenue creation for operators. This was the promise of 5G. So finally, we get to a point where we say, okay, now we can truly offer this in a programmable way. Sure, you can offer it differentiated connectivity without programmability, but if you want the largest participants in the ecosystem to be able to create new ideas about how we can, or others, create value streams within the operator base for both our regular traditional customers as well as enterprise, this is where it goes.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting your focus on the software-centric and programmable and agile nature of it. Maybe I can ask you, BG, what is it about Open RAN that particularly facilitates what Rob was just describing?
Yeah. So the word Open RAN means it's a complete open ecosystem. So the only way to bring in innovation, to bring in faster speeds, automation, the things that Rob was saying, is when you have a diverse ecosystem, because what that does, it promotes competition, it promotes innovation. So I think different companies have different skill sets, and in an open ecosystem, you can pick the best of breed and bring those companies in, bringing the best of all use cases. Yeah.
And what sort of barriers or hurdles do operators have to overcome to sort of fully embrace the Open RAN opportunity?
So just to pick on what Joe mentioned, so a few years ago when Open RAN came out, the greenfield operators all picked Open RAN. So there was good adoption, and it was much easier because they had no base to protect, and it was much simpler, clean network. But the challenge for us was with brownfield operators. With brownfield operators, I see two different challenges. One is, how does a brownfield operator introduce a new vendor? It's not unique to Open RAN, but how do you introduce a new vendor into your network ecosystem? It's not easy. It's very complex. Yep. So that's one. So you have to wait for the right technology refresh cycles for those opportunities to come along. And the second thing is, for a brownfield operator, for a new vendor like Mavenir, is feature parity. So 5G is easy. We started that with 5G. We have the feature parity with most of the competition. But 4G, we had a lot of catching up to do compared to the historical players, because they've been building 4G features for the last 10, 20 years. We had a 2-year or 3-year compressed cycle to catch up on feature parity. The good news is we are there now. We are finally caught up with all the 4G feature parity. So I think hopefully in the next 2-3 years, we'll see an improvement, a big uptick in Open RAN adoption.
Yeah. And the competition is heating up. What you say about competition is absolutely right. And one thing I noticed here at the show is the companies that are most competitive in Open RAN have closed booths. So Open RAN closed booth. It's a sign of the competition is getting more fierce and the opportunities are bigger. Chasing some of the big operators in Europe right now and the big American operators, these opportunities are much bigger and long term. And so the competition is getting a little tighter right now. Right,
well, that's really interesting. And I like that juxtaposition of Open RAN and closed booth. There was lots of talk, perhaps, when Open RAN first really emerged as a sort of prominent buzzword, for want of a better term. There were lots of talk from many operators about their big plans for it. Joe, how are those going? How do you think operators have delivered on their initial Open RAN commitments?
Well, it's a slow process. To be realistic, the cycle in this industry is pretty long. You put equipment in the field, and it's unlikely that you're going to tear it out and put Open RAN in to save money. That doesn't save money. Right. So what you do is you wait for an opportunity at the end of the life cycle for one product, or maybe you have new spectrum coming out, or something is happening in the network. That's your chance to invest. So it's like when a train leaves a station, you want to jump on it with the latest architecture. And a lot of operators have deployed their 5G networks without Open RAN, and now we're looking for that next interval, that next opportunity to jump on the next train. And so I think that is coming. AT&T is actually jumped ahead and they said, okay, we're going to invest in this. That's unusual, and that's leading the industry, I would say. Other operators are taking a more careful approach where they're waiting for new spectrum to come, and when they go out to touch each cell site, they'll take that opportunity to start Open RAN actual deployment. And so I think we'll see it play out over the next 8 years, really.
Right. So picking up on what Joe was just saying, Rob, why did AT&T, why did you make the decision to be as proactive and entrepreneurial when it comes to Open RAN?
I think we had a lot of experience in hardware, disaggregation of hardware and software in the network. We started actually, ironically, in the transport side, which is a hard area to actually disaggregate. And we've seen the benefits and value that we get out of that. There was a lot of focus in there, in particular on the TCO side. The hardware and software layers are disaggregated for us now fully in the core, in the 5GSA core implementation we have. So we see that as a sort of the jump off point to say, yes, disaggregation needs to come, whether it's for cloud RAN, or even for network management. So when we move forward with that, we say, okay, this is the opportunity that we're interested in. It gives us opportunities also. Admittedly, we want to encourage a healthy ecosystem. We want to encourage a healthy supplier base. But it does come, with challenges. It's a transformational thing. Some of the other domain teams have already been through the transformations, but the teams that we have that deploy and manage the RAN today are not experienced in hardware and software disaggregation. They're used to an appliance model. They're used to something where they plug it in and it works. They're not used to counting software releases across 3 different layers of software and keeping track of it. So that does create challenges for us, but at the same time, we look at it from the perspective of this gives us a chance to be, truly open and benefit from from openness. And I can think of, and we just came from a workshop, where we had a number of the RAP providers speak of all their use cases that they're really intrigued by, things that would normally take us a long time or would be challenging to implement within the RAN, but because of where network programmability layers sit, they can see and touch more data. So that means that things that would normally be difficult to implement in the RAN become simple at the network management layer.
You have a lot of your own RApps or things that you've developed internally, right?
We have about we have 45-ish apps that we've developed, either co-developed with a partner developed on their own. The majority of which are actually AT&T owned developed. We use them. Most of them fit into the category of traditional SON. And they're SON-like applications, but energy savings is well within that domain. Things that help us with improving spectrum efficiency by adjusting tilts and power levels and overshoot. We have applications that do that. We have actually a number of applications that support us with traffic management. And we had started down the journey to build applications that supported automation itself as we deploy. Not automation in terms of a cell went out of service and start changing RF parameters, but actually to identify where the faults are and identify what actions need to be taken in the network specifically. We had a number of automation applications that were bespoke and sitting outside of that application suite. Now we're trying to move those applications specifically into the construct of being our apps.
Yeah, what Rob just said was actually music to my ears, because when many operators talk about Open RAN, it's how they approach it. What Rob is talking about is truly open, where you can bring in individual bespoke RAP providers could actually write applications and deploy it in their network, because it's truly open, programmable network. Many other operators follow certain vendors' strategy where they say it's open, but my RIC will only work with my radio.
Yeah.
To me, that's not open, because then again, you're limited. You may have some more programmability, you may have some flexibility, but then your opportunity is really limited because you can only do what that company does.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. In fact, it picks up on something I was thinking of bringing up anyway, which is the whole terminology. It's easy to be skeptical about buzzwords. Obviously, here at Mobile World Congress this year, everything's AI. Mm-hmm. And it's also my job, and I guess yours as well, Joe, to be skeptical and to interrogate these things. But Open RAN as a term and as a concept, do you think that has evolved? And do you think we need? I'll ask you first, BG, but you're all welcome to opine on this. Do you think we need to reframe it or describe it differently? What are your thoughts about the concept and how we perceive what we're discussing?
Yeah, so in my mind, so initially when Open RAN came about, right, it was completely disaggregated network. So every component can be separate and it's completely fully disaggregated. So Dish was one of the early adopters.
Yeah.
They followed that model. But what I see more and more, especially with the brownfield operators are doing, they are not focused on the disaggregation to that level. They are doing like what AT&T is doing is brilliant, right? They're starting with a common baseband, but they're bringing different radio vendors. That was very interesting because it's a much more practical way to bring in new vendors into a very complex network. But what I see more and more what operators doing, or the shift changing, is using the principles of Open RAN. So they focus more on automation, they focus more on using AI-based new services and bringing network efficiency, like Rob mentioned, spectral efficiency. We are doing some AI RAPs for an operator in Asia, which actually helps with improving voltage drop rates, reducing the voltage drop rates, improving handover efficiency, reducing the ping pong effect across different spectrums. So, but we are doing it across multi-vendor. So we are not saying this solution works only with Mavenir radio. We initially deployed it with Mavenir radio to show the concept, but we are now deploying it with multi-vendors. So I think the principles of Open RAN are getting more and more adopted because operators see a clear benefit for that.
Obviously, when you're talking about business, ultimately any investment, that abbreviation ROI, return on investment, comes up. I'd actually like to ask both of you, but I'll start with Rob. How do you, if at all, how do you measure the ROI of your Open RAN investment, and how can you demonstrate it?
So I think it's a constant discussion. I mean, for every investment we make in the network, we do a careful TCO analysis to determine, does it make sense, does it not make sense?
Yeah.
And we don't look over a 3-year cycle, we look over an 8-year cycle. And it takes us a lot of time to conclude specifically on whether we think there's value or there's no value. And what we often have discussions about is, as you trade and potentially get lower cost components in a disaggregated solution and reintegrate them, what is that cost of integration? What do we have, not just that cost of integration, but the cost of the operational complexity that we're adding to the network as we disaggregate? And that's perhaps the thing that we often struggle with. So we got, I think for our perspective, we got a very good TCO benefit by migrating from legacy appliance-based network management. We got a very good TCO benefit by bringing in new radio vendors, because not only, one of the things that we struggled with a lot is that the radios that we're looking for, especially for densification, we had what we would consider to be somewhat unique requirements. In Europe, for example, they try to prefer small cells that are 2 by 5 watts or very low output power. We often get products in the US that are mirrors of those products, highly optimized for 2 by 5 watts. We don't get any offload from them. We finally don't benefit from densifying when we add those kinds of radios to our network. Conversely, we often ask for very high power in the US. So when we ask them to give us a small cell radio, they give us something which is high powered or medium powered. Effectively, it's what they would deploy in rooftop, again, in other markets. So the consequence is we were looking for something that would fit inside a shroud and give us a reasonable amount of output power. And the advantage of going to an open architecture is you're no longer constrained by vertical stacks. You can give 100% of the market, 100% of your market overall to a single vendor if you want, but you can easily modulate the margin share depending upon how somebody's performing and how, if they have any challenges with the integration or they have any challenges with delivering their gear. So that's a new tool for us to use, and that's the benefit of going from a vertically integrated network into a horizontally integrated one, is that now we can offer the entire baseband layer to somebody if we wanted to, theoretically. We could offer radios for a specific frequency across the entire network, as opposed to asking and working with 3 different vendors in parallel to deliver the same thing at the same time, because we want to deliver an ubiquitous service quality across the network. So Open RAN has given us that opportunity really to do that.
I would add one thing, as we're talking about ROI, I think I agree with everything Rob said about cost side, you save cost in the operations and in buying products, and that'll all save money. But I think the other half of the ROI equation is new revenues. And this flexibility that comes out of an open system allows them to automate the network, to implement things for enterprises that they might have taken longer to get done before. And that flexibility is going to allow Rob's company to go after large enterprises and offer them something for premium performance for a premium price. It's going to boost the revenue of the industry. And that in the longer term might be an even more important component to the ROI.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Across the whole industry, a lot of Mavenir's contemporaries are talking about this overall, to paraphrase the concept of a rising tide lifts all ships type of thing. And some investment by definition has to be a bit speculative. You obviously try and make it as accurate and well planned as possible, but it's going to be a bit speculative. And I think what you've just said, Joe, is consistent with that. There's a degree of future proofing. There's a degree of the old Wayne Gretzky quote, skating to where the puck's going to be, sort of thing.
Well, in the enterprise market, nobody knows that the puck's going to be in one place. In fact, we know that the puck will be in 1,000 different places. So that's why we talk about flexibility in the network, having an open system.
So
things
you're
like
ready
applications
to capitalize on whatever. Yeah.
Right.
New use cases makes it so much easier when you have a programmable network. You can develop use cases much faster.
Yes.
Much shorter time.
So the agility and the flexibility and the scalability. We're nearly out of time. It's been a fascinating conversation. So I just want to round it off really by asking a very open question. I'll start with you, BG, and then work back towards me. For people watching and listening to this, what's one other thing that maybe we haven't discussed so far, or that we have, that you really want to emphasize, that you want people to take away about Open RAN today and in the future?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that I'd like people watching this to take away is, if you look at, there was a lot of buzz in Open RAN. Then there's been the negative press cycle on Open RAN saying it's a failure, it hasn't delivered on its TCO.
I plead guilty.
Exactly. So, but it's just a cycle. So I think as Rob had mentioned, different operators have different cycles and when they can introduce a new vendor. So as those refresh cycles come in, I think you'll start seeing the Open RAN adoption really pick up. And then that's one, and the other one is the whole refarming of spectrum. That's another time where we'll see Open RAN pick up. So I really think the next 2-3 years, as you correctly project, we're really seeing that, because we have many of the big European operators. So they're all doing their network refresh cycles, and that's when we think they're all reserving certain percentage of the network for Open RAN, and we'll see the adoption really pick up.
Okay, great. So final thoughts on Open RAN for you, Rob?
I mean, I think we had a good time here. I think that was perhaps the best part of this. A good discussion overall, and I think it was good to hear both Joe and BG just sort of weigh in on the direction we're going with network programmability, that this is the opportunity. So we shift the discussion specifically in where we go next. And I think as the network becomes more programmable, and as we move to software-driven networks, we're really going to be able to consume innovation in other domains at a much more rapid pace, whether it's silicon, cloud, spectrum, or AI. And I only said it once.
Yes, you've all been very restrained.
That's good.
And so, final thoughts from you, Joe. I don't know if we touched on it before in this discussion, but you shared one of your charts just showing what a sort of counterintuitive growth curve Open RAN's been on. So maybe you can just sort of summarize any last thoughts about Open RAN and where it's headed.
Yeah, that's right. That graph shows the greenfield market growing and then coming down, and then the brownfield market growing and up to the right. And I do see it that way. In fact, if you look at other markets like smartphones or PCs or others, what naturally happens in the market is the market consolidates down to one or two software options, and then there's a lot of hardware vendors and then a lot of application vendors. In PCs, you have Windows. Everyone has Windows in a company, and they might all have PCs built by different companies, and they might all have different apps, but they all have the same operating system. And that's how that market achieves the flexibility and the scalability that it needs. And that's what's happening. We're transforming the RAN business to look like many other electronics markets that have done the same thing.
Brilliant. Well, it's actually, this conversation will be really helpful for me from a journalistic point of view in terms of repositioning Open RAN, and a lot of what I'm getting is it's about this network programmability paradigm. I shouldn't pick such long words at the end of Mobile World Congress. And so I'll leave it there. Thank you. That's really fascinating. Thank you all for your time. It was really interesting. Much appreciated.